So, so we're going to talk about function notation. We're going to talk about graphing function notation. We're going to talk about a lot of things. So, okay. So sometimes we're going to have this. We have a situation here, y, and we're going to talk about why do we have function notation, because that's very important. So some of you guys have seen this, y equal to negative 2x plus 4, y equal to 3x plus 2. This is not a system equation, however, you probably see that a lot in SAT. I think the SAT, there should be a lot of system equation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, so the system equation, those are pretty easy. If you go through the last test, we actually go through a harder system equation. So, here's what I'm going to ask you a question. When x equal to 2, equal to 2, what is the y value? So here's the equation says, okay, well, y equal to negative 2x plus 4, y equal to 3x plus 2, and then when x is equal to 2, what is the y value? Now, what is your question for me?
Which one?
Which one, exactly. So which y I'm asking. So it's very hard to differentiate that. So mathematic people says, well, we have to figure out a way to indicate which equation is. So we're actually using something called function notations. So in place of this y, I'm gonna rename that y.
G of x.
Well, we're gonna name that f of x for now. So in this case, we're gonna say, hey, let's cross this part out, and let's say, what is f of x? And let's cross the other part off. Says, what is the g of x? So that way, I can ask you differently. I can ask you, says, hey, instead of writing this long line, it's so complicated, I'm just gonna ask you, says, hey, what is g of 3? And that's much easier because g of 3 represents, says that 3 is the input. This is the input. Input into which function? Into the g functions.
Yeah.
Now g of 3 is going to represent output. Input, output, right? So if you have input, what is my output as? And you learn that in Algebra 1, so something about input, something output, something called dependent variable and independent variables. So in this case, the 3 is going to go into, well, it's not going to this one because that's not g function. Because it asks you what the g function is, you're going to plug into the g function for the x and figure out what is the output here. So in this case, I'm going to say g of 3 is equal to 3. And make sure you do a parenthesis every time you substitute. Again, for the so many times, it's plus 2, so that's equal to 9 plus 2, so it's 11. So make sure you put a parenthesis. Every time you substitute, always put a parenthesis. So every time you substitute, you put a parenthesis. From now on and from forever, you always put a parenthesis around it. That's kind of secure your answer correctly. So that's going to be this. A lot of people are confused. Even as easy as, I don't know, probably some of you guys see it familiar. is sometimes they can say, okay, well, what is g of y? No, g of z. That just means what? Plug in z. Z is my input, and then that becomes a new expression, 3z plus 2. Parentheses. All you gotta do is plug in. That's the only thing you have to do. Does that look familiar, Carlos? You probably see it yesterday, right? It's a different variable. Okay. Questions? So it can be easier just plug in whatever it is. Whatever x, you're gonna plug in z. Okay? Question about this part. Now we're gonna talk about all those rules. This is notation wise. There's a function notation. There's a lot of things here, so we're gonna talk about those. So the function notation can be represented this way or this way. I prefer the way on the right. That's just me. Yeah. But because that's easier to read. But sometimes they give you this side and they say, hey, what is the other side? So you should know this: f plus g of x. For some weird reason, I don't know why people keep on thinking about this distribution. It's not distributions. This just means f plus g of x. That also means f of x plus g of x. This is a very easy mathematical rules. And f minus g of x is equal to f of x minus g of x. Very, very straightforward. Has nothing to do with distributions. Please don't think of that like that. And f over g of x is equal to f of x over g of x. But in this case, you have to be careful. G of x cannot equal to 0. It's in denominator. If a denominator equal to 0, it's going to cause a function undefined. So that part cannot be a function. F dot g of x is equal to f of x times g of x. But this dot is a solid circle. Because later on there's a difference. There's another one, looks very similar like this one, but it's an open circle. And that means completely different than the other one. Okay? So you have to understand, this is a dot. Okay, a dot. Okay? It's not open circle, because open circle means completely different things. Question about this one. Okay, so we're gonna go back to this equation. We're gonna say, hey, can we help you to evaluate following things? So sometimes you're gonna get expressions. So the clue is this: if I says, what is f of x plus 2? What do you think that f of x plus 2 mean? Yes? Jennifer?
Just plug in x or substitute x plus 2 for x.
Yes. So whatever inside the parenthesis, you're going to substitute as x. So for example, I'm going to write down a function like this: minus 2. And then plus 4, and I'm going to change that to x plus 4. Do we say x plus 4? X plus 2. Is it x plus 2? Okay. Yeah. So then therefore, is whatever that x, right? See this x is right here? So I'm going to replace that x with x plus 2. That's it. Just replace that x with the x plus 2. But you got to put parentheses. What if you don't put parentheses, then your distribution is going to be wrong. So make sure you put a parenthesis. Make sure you put a parenthesis. Okay? Every time you substitute something, you put a parenthesis. So now I'm going to distribute. I'm going to simplify this. That's equal to what? Negative 2x minus 4 plus 4. That's equal to negative 2x. So this is the expression, end up to be your expressions. If it's a number, then it'll become evaluations. Yes?
Can you have a y in there?
Can you have a y in there?
Can you go 1 plus
That's a good question. I never seen put in y in there. Because f of x technically a y,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you don't do
That's
put
why I
f of a y. But later, in calculus later, calculus 3, you see some type of functions like that, so represented that way. So right now, I don't have to worry about it.
Gotcha.
Okay. So if you have here, does that make sense? Okay. So let me ask you, what will be f minus g of x in this case, in terms of this? What's f minus g of x? Be careful. What's f minus g of x? Ariana, you studying something else? Looking at computer screen. Oh, is it the live stream? What is it? Huh? Oh, Desmos. I need to pay attention here. Put your computer down. So what's f minus g of x here? Yes?
You would subtract two equations.
You subtract two equations, so good. But you have to be careful. What do you? You have to have a parenthesis. Parenthesis is your best friend in mathematics. If you don't have parenthesis, you screw on everything. If you have parentheses, how many mistakes you guys make on the last test is all about parentheses? A lot. Some of you guys, right? You forgot to do a parenthesis, pause 10 points, 20 points, 30 points. Eventually, you just start adding up. So this means this, right? F of x minus g of x. Is that difficult? No, I just write it down. So f of x is blue, so it's going to be negative 2x plus 4, parenthesis. And then the other one is 3x plus 2. And the middle part is negative. So I'm just subtracting those two, so it's going to be negative 2x minus 3x. So I'm going to distribute that, negative 2x plus 4. I break down the parenthesis, negative 3x minus 2. So that's equal to negative 5x plus 2. Any question about this part? This is really super easy. Okay? That make sense? Destiny, you okay? Confused where? I just plug in f of x, which is f of x is negative 3x plus 4. G of x is the red, so it'll be minus that. But you have to distribute that negative sign inside, and then distribute it and simplify. I think a lot of time on SAT they ask you in terms of I, and you just have to distribute and then just simplify it. Question about this part? No? Okay. You guys are kind of boring today. Or maybe that I'm boring. Okay, question about this part?
No, sir.
No? Yes.
That would be the answer.
That will be answer because this is an expression, therefore the answer is going to be an expression. If it's a number, it's going to be end up with the evaluation. So what would it be if I says what is f plus g of 2? What would it be? So you can try it two different ways. You can try to add f of x plus g of x, plug in 2, or try to plug in f of 2 plus g of 2. I prefer the second way actually, because that evaluation is much better. Okay. I know. Ariana, you gonna pay attention, or are you gonna do the problem? Kind of sit there and carry a book bag, doesn't want anything else.
Are you sore? Ariana, are you sore? For some reason my back is super sore. I don't understand what we do.
Question about this. You guys got it? What is it? 8. So I can do it this way. I can say f of 2 plus g of 2, right? And I'm going to say plug in 2 in here, so it's going to be what? Minus 2 times 2 plus 4, and and I'm gonna put a parenthesis. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Plus g of 2 is gonna be what? G of 2 is gonna be 3 times 2 plus 2. And then you're gonna evaluate this. This is gonna be minus 4 plus 4. That's equal to 6 plus 2. And then that's equal to 8. So the answer should be 8. You can also do f of x times g of x. So what will be f g of x? It's basically just FOIL together, and then you simplify that, you're gonna get an answer. We're gonna talk about divide a little bit more because divide you had to be cautious. So this part is divide. Divide seems like a lot easier, but you have to pay attention to the bottom part. So this one divided by this one, so basically it says, well, f over g of x, that just means f of x over g of x. This is super easy. You just have to plug in that g of x. So it'll be negative x 2x plus 4 over 3x plus 2. And you cannot simplify anymore. You should recognize that's not simplifiable. However, this is the part that you have to pay attention. The denominator. In pre-calc, we're going to be very picky about those details. And this detail says, well, g of x cannot equal to 0. That's some restrictions. Cannot equal to 0.
For the multiplication.
So here it's going to be 3x plus 2 cannot equal to 0. And then 3x cannot equal to negative 2. X cannot equal to negative 2 over 3. So here you got to list down to says x can be this function, but not including x equal to negative 2 over 3, because that's the part that's going to cause this function undefined, and you have to worry about that. Very, very important that you have to worry about that. And f dot g is going to give me this because it's just two functions multiply each other. You just have to FOIL. Instead of subtracting, they are FOILing each other. Okay. So everybody should get the same thing on this one, right?
Yeah.
That's just algebra 1. That's not something hard.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's go into something that you might not know, because a lot of you guys probably already knew this. Just kind of refresh in your memory. Says, oh, this is a function notation. But the term of pre-calc is a little bit different. Pre-calc is really focused on if you understand the graphing or not. So we're gonna go back to the back room. We're gonna go use a graphing board, and we're gonna talk about that. Because it can be more. So I draw two graphs here, all in one graphing grid. So I have two graphs, f of x and g of x, and I say, hey, I can ask you, says, what is f of, because I don't give you a function. Realize before I give you a function, you can plug in. Am I really that boring today?
No, I'm just tired.
Okay, so what would be f of 5 here? That's not fun. Let's do f of negative 3. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, a lot of you guys already know this. The negative 3 is the input or output? Input, so input, right? This means what? Means when x equal to negative 3, what is y in terms of f functions? F functions. Okay, so all we gotta do is put an input. Input is the what? Negative 3, so it'll be 1, 2, 3. My input is negative 3. My output is gonna be the what is on the graph, the y value. So that's equal to what? So 1. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So what is g of 3? Shh, don't shout it. Okay. Other people need to know this. What is g of 3 is? We're gonna ask you more complicated later, don't worry. Maria, what do you think G of 3 is? Read the graph. The black one is the f function, the g function is the red function. -3, okay, so she says -3, that seems right. So G of 3 is gonna be what? 1, 2, 3, right? Now what's my y value for the red function? So like 1, 2, 3, 4, it's -4. Okay, you probably just count around. Okay, now I'm gonna put a combination of both. What is G of G minus F of 2? Oh, sorry, G of F2. Thank you. I'm like, what did I do? Obviously, one of those days. So what's G minus F of 2? Don't shout it, answer please. Because other people might think. So now in terms of, I don't give you a function. You have to figure out what is what.
I would say so.
Destiny, what do you think?
I'm trying to figure this out.
You're lost? Justin, what do you think? You lost too? I'm asking G minus F over 2 in terms of that graph.
So don't tell me how to do simplification. I swear to God, if you tell me that negative 50
Kyle, what do you think?
I will literally
No
stop.
negative.
What is G minus F of 2? Good, let's write that down first, right? G of 2 minus F of 2.
Yeah, so
But then we can go in and find out what a G of 2 is. What is G of 2, Kyle? What is G of 2, Justin?
Oh, T minus F.
Yeah.
So I have now I know what it is.
1, 2, and then what? What is G of 2? Down what? No, G of 2 is going to be in between, right? So you can look at it. 1, 2, 3, and it's halfway, so 3.5. So that's equal to what? G of 2 is equal to 3.5 minus, what's F of 2? F of 2 is easy. 1, 2, 2. So its answer is going to be 1.5.
Negative 3.5.
Oh, negative 3.5?
Yeah.
Sorry, negative 3.5. So that's equal to negative 5.5. That make sense? Ariana, are you paying attention? You're kind of out there somewhere.
She's tired.
She's thinking about boyfriend.
The lack of boyfriend.
The lack of boyfriend.
Yikes.
Why you roasting her like that? Question about this part. Okay, so that give you another one. Just make sure you can do it. So can I ask you, what is f dot g of negative 3? So you just have to read the graph. So a lot of time that we don't focus on the graph, we focus on everything algebraically so much, so that we're not focusing on that part.
Yeah.
I like it to use your hands and
Yeah,
everything.
because I have to like see.
You're like,
Yeah, it's just like.
you're like.
Yeah. You should
Like,
see her.
no, that's
I
just the head
you
and
should see
everything.
her when she's going through a crowd. She's like.
Josephine, is that part, it recorded this part or no?
Yeah, I can see it.
But bro, she does like the head movement and everything.
Yeah, like with the unit circle, I have to do the same thing. I have to be like, okay.
What's f dot g of negative 3? Ariana,
Let's go.
you're not attention. You're not paying attention today. Is your name Ariana? I didn't call you. You wish you were Ariana. Don't tell her. Why are you telling her? You're not helping her.
Oh.
What's f dot g of -3? Yeah, on a graph, and you're gonna tell me what the evaluation. What's gonna be a number? What? F of -3, good. And it's gonna be times by what? G of a -3? What is f of -3 in this case?
On the graph, 1, 2, 3, and the place of the F3. The one that, the one is
Yeah, look on the graph.
the black line is like
Top right, you'll see that.
The next one says
X, we're looking at F.
Oh, she says Ocala.
She said 1.
She said 1? What do you say for G of -3? Destiny. -1? Is that right?
Indeed.
So that answer is -1. Okay? It's very easy. All you gotta do is learning how to read a graph. A lot of you guys turn, when you see graph, your brain turn off, but it's not like this. So I'm gonna show you two other functions, okay? This function is gonna be more special because a lot of you guys don't know what this function is. So can I erase this part?
Yes, sir.
So the next one is gonna be f of
Oh, okay, so what if you put
g
F of g of x. So like first you solve g of x.
of
F of g of x is
x.
so like you do g of x and then you plug in and then you add them to it.
Oh,
fog?
oh yeah, no. Later on we're gonna name something funny. Okay, f of g. This is how you read them. Anything in red is gonna be of. So this is how do I read as. So read, you need to learn how to read. And seriously, this is gonna be f of g. Anytime you have this red thing here, it's gonna be of x. Can that screen see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of.
Does that make sense?
It's diagonal.
Yeah, it's at an angle.
But you can see.
Okay, so f of g of x. F of g of x. That means anytime you have f, that means what? Parentheses.
You can see.
That means parentheses. So that means it's f of g of x.
Two parentheses.
So there was a parenthesis right here, this is f, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're going from inside out, always. Inside out, again. So here's a question. We don't want to ask you something very complicated. You're going from inside out. What is f of g of,
Okay.
let's say 3? That's too easy. Okay, well, we'll start with the easy one. So what would it be with f of g of 3? Don't shout the answer, please. I want you guys. Now remember, going from inside out. So here, what you're gonna look like this. Look at this first. Do you see that? Do you see that? And then you go like this. Okay, so look from the inside out. Don't look from the outside in. Look from inside out.
First you do G of 3. Yeah, first you do G of 3. And whatever that equals, where you go.
Oh. So start from here, right? Inside is G of 3. Okay. Kyle, what's G of 3 here? You're uglier. Wow. You don't know? G of 3?
You look so neon.
Okay, Ariana? G of 3 is gonna be 3. So the 1, 2, 3 is -4. Perfect. It's gonna be F of -4. Okay? So what is F of a -4? Kyle, what's the F of -4 this time?
Legit. Stop flexing. Get out a pencil.
Nope. This is a -4, so x equal to -1, 2, 3, 4. But look at the f functions. F function is the black one, so it's going to be 2. Okay? You want to try again? So what will be G f of 2? F of, I don't know. F of -4. Let's do -4. So let's see if you guys can do that.
Write it weird.
Because I do.
So what is G of f of -4? So make sure everybody in this room can do this. Can I see the screen over there now? Oh no.
I can't even see.
Which one are you trying to see? That? Yeah, you can see it before too.
Oh my gosh, I was thinking. I did F of X.
Everybody didn't get this one right.
What'd you get?
That is not right.
No, it is.
How?
It is.
I mean, yeah.
It is.
Oh, you can use the fraction.
You're good.
What, 2?
It's 7.
Well, I thought he did 2.
Yes,
No, you're good.
that's what I saw. I was like,
Oh, okay.
yeah. We have to split them. Like, actually. Like, if we were to split, how would we do it? I don't know. Probably each person is up.
Okay, got it?
Split, like, this section. Yeah.
Maria, you got it? What'd you get? For what answer?
Oh, F? I got F is 2.
F of -4 is 2. Okay, so what is G of 2? So you're right.
Oh, 3.5.
So this one is what? G of what? 2? And then what?
Oh, 3.
Negative 3.5. Good. Because at 2, 1, 2 is going to be 1, 2, 3, 3.5. Yes, that's the answer. Right? Okay.
Theo? Theo? That's funny. I don't know what he's doing. He's doing gymnastics.
I'm stretching.
Okay, so question about this. So there are two types of function, f of a g and g of f. So the thing's gonna written like this is g of f. Now remember, this is not solid dot. If solid dot is multiplication. Of that means within the function. It's a function within the function. So this is gonna be g of f of x. Okay? So let me ask you.
Mr. Y. Is that an S?
F?
G. Oh, is it S? Oh my god.
Why would it, have we been messing with S's at all?
That's why-
At all.
That's why I asked.
Okay, so I call this
Oh, bye.
I call this again, I'm gonna call this a fuck off.
And fog off.
Oh.
Did you get it?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
It's fog off.
Oh,
That's how I
I
wrote
thought
it.
he said.
See? It's fog off.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah, so
Right,
fog off
it's
and
a-
numb.
F
G.
of
F-O-G.
G
So,
of F, right?
No.
Fog off.
fog off.
One.
Fog off.
Did I mess it up?
Yes. Look, F of 1. That's why I
Not
write.
first.
That's why I write it like this. So prioritize. Prioritize.
It just sounds like
your F of G of F of 1. So F of 1 over there.
Mr. A,
I know
have you
it.
ever said the F
And
word
then
in
over here,
class?
G of 1.
No.
No, he said that's one of those curse
No,
words
no,
that
no,
he
I
doesn't
know,
say.
I know, I know.
G of 1, he goes down. G of 3.
I say fog off.
And then 3.
Fair enough.
1, 2, 3.
I know.
I look at the wrong side.
Okay, do you guys understand this?
Fog
Yeah,
off.
I understand.
Okay, so
Here's what I got.
I'm gonna go with the inside function first. What's F of 1? F of 1 is what?
1.
Is 1, so that's easy. That means F of G of 1. And then G of 1 is gonna be what?
Negative.
-3, so it's equal to F of -3. Now what's F of -3? So 1, 2, 3. F of -3 is what? Oh, it's 1.
You're so weird.
A question about this part?
No.
No, it's pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
Indeed.
So later on we're going to talk about F of G, G of F in terms of algebraic function. But for us evaluation on the graphing, you just have to be able to read a graph. I can give you F of G of F. I can give you a FOF, F O F,
And
G
just
of
imagine
G,
this in the middle of the,
G of
the
F,
PSAT.
G of inverse of F. So we're going to talk about a lot of those, and later on you're going to see how those put in combinations. Okay, so you're going to see some of those on the SAT or on AP Calc next year. Okay.
We got a dentist appointment.
Max does.
Wait,
Okay, that's it.
Alrighty.
Jay, you're gonna be here after school?
Yeah.
Are you tutoring? Maybe?
Some
I don't
people
have
is
so much. If you tutor, I'll tutor.
some people it's going to